everyone. Welcome to our live chat with Kira Peikoff, author of the medical thriller No Time to Die. We are very thrilled to be speaking with her today on the topic of aging, which is a central theme in her book. And we also wanted to let everyone that's viewing today know that through January 20th, you can get No Time to Die at a great reduced price on Kindle and iBooks. So that's some exciting news, a great offer for everybody here. Kira, can you tell us a bit about yourself in the book before we start the questions?
Hi, everybody. I'm a thriller writer and a journalist. I write about health and science in nonfiction, and in thrillers, I love to cover topics that have bioethical significance. So, controversial topics in science and medicine that have high stakes and moral dilemmas. And my new book, No Time to Die, centers around a young woman who has mysteriously stopped aging and becomes the target of competing factions who believe that the key to staying young forever may be in her DNA. So that's the setup. It is actually based on a real life condition, which I'll get into a little bit more later. I see some people have asked about that, but it's pretty interesting. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. So let's get started. We have a relevant question for 2015. It's a new year and another year older, but many of us want to stop aging. And the question is, should we strive for it? And what impact would staying young have on us and our society?
Well, that's quite a question to tackle in just a couple of sentences. You could write books about
Right?
that. But um,
Yes.
there's many nuanced ways to answer this question. I think most people right away will worry about resource allocation and what will happen if we all
Hmm.
just started competing for resources and nobody died off. You know, it seems like it would be pretty catastrophic. Yet, I think what's more realistic to imagine is not that everybody would live forever. We're talking about a medical way to slow down our body's rate of aging. And if this were really the case,
Hmm.
I think it would be best given to people who would truly benefit, like people who have conditions that accelerate their aging or their cognitive decline, like Alzheimer's, or people who stand
Right.
to, you know, face great suffering if they're growing old and frail, etc. So I don't think necessarily everybody should take it or right away,
Right.
but it would be slowly something that we could try and see, really for the point of alleviating human suffering and promoting our happiness, but with responsibility towards resources as well.
Right. Now, Francis brings up Syndrome X, which is what you were referring to just a moment ago. And she says, is it a real thing or is it a condition that you concocted for your novel? Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, this is actually a real life disorder that has only been recently discovered. And in fact, it's going to be named in a medical paper. I can tell you, I have the in on that, and it's going to be discussed and published later this
Wow.
year. It's actually at least six people on Earth have been known and diagnosed with it. And it's a failure to age. These people, they all are girls so far for some unknown reason. They may look like toddlers or little kids, but they're actually like 25 years old or 20.
Wow.
And it's just really bizarre. So nobody today yet
That's
knows
crazy.
why.
Um, Francis has another question. If scientists found a cure for aging, how do you think that would affect the way we live and the people we become? I don't know if
I
she
think
means mentally or,
that's something I thought about a lot when I was writing this book.
yeah,
And I think if we knew we had much longer lifespans than we do now, like what we basically have 80 years now, 90 years maybe, um, I think our
right.
whole view towards our careers and our love lives would completely dramatically change. I mean, you wouldn't have to just settle on one career and
Hmm.
retire at 65. You could potentially have multiple careers and get multiple degrees, you know, travel many places, read and see everything there is to see over who knows how many years. You would know generations of your own children. So I think society would
Yeah.
just be drastically altered.
Can you imagine that family reunion photo?
I know, imagine
It'd be
if,
like everybody's squeezing.
and this is something kind of weird and creepy almost to imagine, but if we could all kind of stay, let's say around 40 years old or even younger, 30 years old, you could basically be the same age as your kids and grandkids and look like them even as you're old. So
Crazy.
Could be really weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So Angie says, why do you think people are so enthralled with the idea of never aging? What is it in our society that they're so obsessed with?
That's another great question. It's something that's been rooted in human society for as long as we've been around. It's that fountain of youth
Mhm.
myth has just always enthralled us. And I think it has to do with the fact that well, number one, everybody is terrified of death. And number two, we don't really know what comes after that, if anything. Of course,
Mhm.
all the world religions will tell you that there's a heaven or some kind of afterlife, but then truly it's not scientifically proven that there is. So as much as we all love to believe that, or I would love to believe that, I can't really wholeheartedly endorse something like that without true proof. So I think it's a fear of oblivion. If there's nothing after our life, then we want to stick around as
Mhm.
long as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Rita wants to know what initially drew you to the medical field and writing these types of thrillers.
Good question. I don't know. I think it has to do with maybe being a little hypochondriac when I was a kid and always kind of being preoccupied with medical conditions. And then when I ended up in college, I took some required courses in biology and genetics and just became fascinated by what was possible and what scientists were developing to combat
Mhm.
diseases with really genius ways to intervene in our own processes. And I just started to wonder about the intersection of this field and politics, philosophy, and realized eventually, years later, that there was really a name for this. It's called bioethics, and it's a field that needs to
Right.
be dealt with because these developments are kind of getting ahead of our understanding of how to react to them. So I'm
I think it's
continually fascinated by them.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that you're pursuing a degree in bioethics and you started out as a journalist and then you went on and you worked in publishing, the publishing field for a while, so you've kind of done a lot of different things. How is your degree in bioethics going? I'm very interested in knowing like what courses you take and
Oh, I
that
love
sounds
it. It's the
awesome.
greatest
Yeah.
it's the greatest degree because it's interdisciplinary and I'm doing this degree at
Oh,
Columbia.
cool.
So I have access to courses across the whole university. So I've taken law, history, philosophy, um, genetic, epidemiology. I just finished a difficult course in that. I'm taking
Fantastic.
all kinds of courses. So it's just been a great exposure to different areas of thought and how all these fields kind of have to work together to figure out answers to some of these really tough questions.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. So it's a new year. What are your resolutions for the new year? Do you have any writing resolutions or just
I do have some
goals?
resolutions. I always like to kind of take the long view at the beginning of a year and reassess where I'm at with my
Mhm.
career and what I want to do next. And
Right.
I'm just at the beginning of starting a new book project. And I mean, really at the beginning, like
Fantastic.
there's nothing to tell anybody yet, but it's in my
Okay.
calendar to really sit down. It's for me, the hardest part is this stage because I feel like I
Mhm.
have so little to work with yet. And it all has to come from me before it can be really called a project. So it's that
Mhm.
early stages of generating an idea. So I got to, get my butt in the chair and just work and start developing the next book. That's my biggest resolution.
We're looking forward to it. So you don't have, is it like before the title stage, like no title yet, just a
Oh no,
baby,
like
like
literally like
not even a baby yet?
it's like a 5-page Word document at this point. There's nothing to discuss yet,
Ah.
but I hope this year that I can make it into something.
Excellent. We're
Yeah.
psyched for that to come out. Um, I was looking on your Facebook page and I saw the New Jersey Star Ledger review and I loved it. And it says Peikoff understands plotting and the final twist is a great surprise. Ultimately, it's easy to see this book translated to the big screen. It feels like an action movie as it plumbs an idea, captivating people since Herodotus wrote about eternal youth in 500 BC. So I think that's an awesome thing. What do you feel about the possibility of the book one day being turned into a movie? Are there any like anxieties or fears or just
I'd love to
excitement?
see it turned into a movie. I think that would be every author's dream, of course. But for readers who have
Yeah.
already read it, I don't want to spoil it, but I have wondered how it could be filmed in a way because there's a certain as you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, a big twist at the end that pretty much depends
Right.
on the format of a book, not on a visual
Mm-hmm.
format to be able to get away with that twist. So I'm not sure. I don't know how a filmmaker would do that, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Shauna wants to know if you hadn't studied bioethics, is there something else you would have chosen, maybe along with your writing career?
Well, I studied journalism in college, but I didn't
Hmm.
narrow down in that field. I just studied journalism overall, and you can go back to school and get a master's in science journalism specifically. So maybe I would have done that instead, but I actually prefer to do what I'm doing because then I get more subject matter exposure and not as much emphasis on the craft, which I've already been doing for a long time. So,
Hmm.
and I've also considered getting an MFA in creative writing, but again, I feel
Right.
like if anyone is a an aspiring writer out there, more than
Hmm.
more important than getting a degree is really finding a mentor or two that you trust who you can learn from and grow with, and that's just as good as a degree in my opinion.
Yeah, great advice. Now, Angie wants to know who are some of your biggest influences in the thriller and suspense genre? Anyone that comes to mind?
Uh, yeah, I really admire Lisa Unger a lot. Michael Palmer, Michael Crichton, Lee Child,
Mhm.
Gillian Flynn.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are more contemporary writers. For older writers, Daphne du
Hmm.
Maurier and I would say
Oh yeah.
um, Marathon Man, that book, William Goldman, really great thriller writers, inspiring for today's thriller writers.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome list. Now, oh, I see some great questions from Barbara Landon. And she says, when people say a cure for aging, what is your initial response? Can you see the whole question there? Because she says, I think that aging isn't a disease, but an inevitable outcome of living.
I think people see it as inevitable because it's always been that way,
Hmm.
and yet there's really no reason in nature that we have to age and die off. And if you look at the trend over the past centuries, our lifespan is continually getting longer and longer because of advances in nutrition and medication. And really, there's no
Hmm.
reason that we have to die off at a certain age. So I think pushing that upper limit is
Yeah.
is something that is truly plausible to do. I don't know about the word cure insinuates that it's a
Hmm.
disease, and I agree that it's not a disease. It's a natural breakdown of your body. It's not necessarily a pathology that's invaded your body, yet it has the same end result, which is that you die of it. So I think
Yeah.
rather than thinking of it as a cure for aging, I would think of it as a way to um, prolong life and delay what may seem inevitable, but I don't really think has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. She also says, if attainable, would an anti-age serum only be available to wealthy people, and how would our population change for the worse? Very interesting.
Well, it depends how cynical you are. I know one of the researchers who I spoke with about my book, who helped me greatly on the science, his belief was that it would, if it was real, only be available to the rich, connected people like
Hmm.
politicians who'd want to hoard it for themselves. That may be true.
Right.
It also could be the fact that some pharmaceutical company develops it and puts it on the market, and people who can afford
Hmm.
it will buy it. Maybe that's the rich, but maybe the price comes down over time the way many things do. For example, the human genome costs $1 billion to be sequenced only like 15 years ago, and now the cost is $1,000. So it could be the kind of product where it's very unattainable for the masses at first, but over decades or who knows how long, it becomes a typical prescription medication that you can get very easily. So hopefully
Hmm.
at one point it wouldn't just be in the hands of certain,
Right.
privileged few.
Hmm. Now, in terms of suspense writing, do you have any like top tips for writers who might want to start writing, a suspense novel?
Yeah, I actually wrote a whole blog about this. If anybody wants to look it up, it's my distilled thoughts, which probably are more
Cool.
articulate than what I can just say right now. But it's on Writer's Digest. If you Google my name
Hmm.
with Writer's Digest, um, I have some tips there about how to pace chapters, how to think about the arc and planning your storyline, and also some tricks about perspective and point of view. So I think rather than go into all of that right now, that I think that's my best advice is to just look up that article.
Well, absolutely. Now, also, you write columns on the side for lots of great, publications. Can you tell us about some of the columns you write? You write about all different types of topics.
Yeah, I write a column once a month for cosmopolitan.com. It's a mystery
Hmm.
diagnosis column in which every month I spotlight a different young woman who has endured some strange medical odyssey until she finally got a
Oh,
correct
wow.
diagnosis. So it's been super interesting. And if anybody has a story to share, you can just write to me. And these columns have gotten a ton of attention and views so far. And I feel good about it because I feel like I can help raise awareness for some of these conditions that don't have a lot of research
Yeah,
dollars and people understanding them. So it's been a good cause, I think, to work on.
cool. And we know that you interviewed a few elderly folks. So,
Mhm.
what type of insight did you gain from speaking to them, just on the topic of aging?
Yeah, I did a column for a little bit on wisdom of elderly people, and I spoke with people in their 90s
Hmm.
and even someone over 100. Uh, and
Oh,
that's a good
wow.
question. I think something that they all seemed to have in common was the advice
Hmm.
that one of the most important things you can do in life is to not hold grudges and
Mm.
to be kind to others. They all stood out to me. The way that you
Hmm.
treat people is in some ways your most enduring legacy. So I
Hmm.
thought that was really good advice.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to know that at the end of everything, that's kind of what's important.
Yeah, like you can, have
Um,
yeah, many accomplishments or failures in your career, etc.,
exactly.
but it's really how you think of people and how they think of you, That's what matters.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, back to your book, No Time to Die. So, how is this different from your other novel? Is it, similar in some ways, totally different? What was the experience like writing both books?
Well, it's a totally different book in terms of plot and storyline and characters from my first book, which is more of a sci-fi futuristic thriller, whereas No Time to Die is a contemporary thriller and it has science and medicine in it, but it's more of a straight thriller and much more,
Yeah.
I think, broadly geared. And as
Hmm.
far as the experience of writing it, I still think that anytime I sit down to write a book, and I've written three now, um, it feels just as hard as the very first time where I felt
Right.
like I didn't know what I was doing.
Hmm.
But eventually, I think over time, I realized maybe I do know what I'm doing a little bit more now, and I know I can get to that last page. Whereas the
Hmm.
first time I did it, I had no idea if I could or not. And that
Right.
confidence does change things.
Yeah. So Syndrome X, we have a couple more questions. Katie wants to know, have there been new developments with cases in the world for people with Syndrome X? And I know last time we spoke, we talked about that. Any new developments?
I have been following up on this, and I will definitely
Hmm.
share it with you all as soon as I know. But my latest interview with the head researcher on this case, which was last week, in fact,
Hmm.
he told me that there will be some news to report at the end of February or early March when they finish analyzing their data, because over the summer they
Oh,
had
wow.
sequenced the DNA of all of these people and analyzed it. So now they're just finishing that up, and there may or may not be some groundbreaking discovery or revelation in any of that, but he couldn't tell me anything for at least a month or a month and a half. So I'm waiting too.
Wow. But that's very soon.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
yeah.
So you'll update us on your Facebook page, Kira
I'll
Peikoff, and then
probably
what's your
yeah,
you'll
I'll
tweet
write
about it
about it.
too.
I'll probably be writing an
Okay.
article about it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Excellent. And tell everyone your Twitter handle. I feel like that's always helpful
It's
for anyone who doesn't know.
it's just my name, which is at Kira
Cool.
Peikoff, and I know that's not the easiest spelling in the world, but that's all it
That's
is.
not too bad.
Just my name.
Excellent. So yeah, any updates, you can follow her there.
Yeah.
Um, so, I had another question here. What was I looking at? Oh, Age reversal experiments done on mice. I've heard a lot about that in the news. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's fairly new, and I don't know too much
Hmm.
about that, but um,
Hmm.
I guess I'm a little bit skeptical about it. It may be possible
Mm,
to do that, but I'm skeptical about the leap from doing experiments on animal models to humans because humans are of course much
right.
more complex. So that may be
Yeah.
possible to do in mice, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen in us anytime soon.
Right. Exactly. Now, Shauna has a question about the different type of writing that you do. She says, how do you differentiate between writing for fiction and then writing a nonfiction piece for, the various publications?
It's so different, really. My process is completely different.
Hmm.
If I'm writing an article, for example, I actually have a piece today in the New York Times. I start with all the sources that I need to speak with. I gather information for, the first week of the project is just doing interviews, keeping everything organized, starting to write an outline, um, recording all the interviews that I do to make sure all the quotes are accurate. So my number one
Right.
concern is just getting everything right and then structuring that information in a way that is logical and communicates the story. So
Hmm.
the prime concern is accuracy and communication. Whereas if I'm writing a thriller or a novel, my main concern is entertainment. I don't have to worry so much
Yeah.
about accuracy. I have to stretch some of the facts that I work with to, fit the story. So
Hmm.
I have more leeway there, which is a relief. But then, of course, I don't have any sources to call. I don't have anyone to tell me what the story is or what information I need. I have
Right.
to come up with it all myself. So it's a completely different process.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to No Time to Die, the title, how did you kind of come up with that, and what does it refer to? Is it something specific in the book?
Well, the title, I've always found difficulty with titles. That was actually
Hmm.
suggested by my mentor, Michael Palmer, who sadly passed away a little while ago, about a year and a
Ah,
half ago. But that was one title he suggested, and it has multiple meanings actually. It could refer to the fact that this girl is not aging. It's possible for her not to die. So maybe there's
hmm.
no time literally that she's going to die. And it also could refer to the idea that this would be the worst time if she was killed because
Yeah.
this crucial secret is in her DNA, maybe. So you could interpret it a few ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Kristen wants to know, what books are you currently reading?
I just finished a bunch of different books that had nothing to do with one another. I just finished a book called
Nice.
You, which was a stalker thriller, super creepy.
Oh,
That came out last
cool.
year. I also read some older books, Daphne du Maurier, and some
Hmm.
literary fiction, Louise Penny. And then now
Cool.
I basically have a clean slate because, as I told you, I'm starting a new project, and when I do this,
Exactly.
I don't want anything else in my head, so I'm not reading anything right now.
Are we allowed to ask, like, what is the main kind of, what's the theme of the new book? Or kind of just
Well,
very,
I can tell you
very
the
brief?
the theme of then I do have a book coming out this October. The one I told you I'm starting wouldn't
Mm,
be for like probably 2 years, but the book I have coming out in
okay.
October, it
Mhm.
deals with the theme of what if you could reverse recent death, and
Ah, okay.
it's very juicy, very exciting. It's actually also like No Time to
Awesome.
Die, based in real research that's going on now. And I learned a ton while I was writing it. I toured a hospital. I met with um, doctors who are working on this, and it's really, really cool. So I'm excited for everybody to get to share this.
And that comes out in
Um,
October,
yeah, early October this
right?
year. It's called Die Again Tomorrow.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Ah, awesome.
yeah.
Now, is there real life resuscitation medicine? Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, it's a big field.
Yeah.
And it's
Wow.
changing and growing in the last 5 years by leaps and bounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know, can you tell us anything about it or
So
that's like such a broad question, but it's like fascinating to me.
And one of the things I learned is that that old paradigm in medicine that if you didn't have oxygen for 4 minutes, you'd be brain dead and that would be it, is not true. Is
Wow.
categorically untrue with today's technology.
Hmm.
You could be pulseless for in the right circumstances, like if you received CPR, you could actually be pulseless for up to 20 minutes and
Oh
be
my gosh.
resuscitated and really not have a lot of brain damage. You could go back to your normal life.
Wow.
So it's
That's really
it's pretty
surprising.
amazing. Yeah.
Huh. So you're learning a lot of stuff about that. That's
Yes.
insane. So, do you have a favorite book to movie adaptation? Anything that you kind of
Huh.
love to watch and read?
I just saw the Gone Girl movie and I thought that that was a really
Mm-hmm.
faithful, excellent adaptation. I liked that one a lot.
I agree.
Yeah. I can't think of any other ones,
I
but
sped through that book
same,
and then I
definitely.
ran out to go see it. Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah.
And her other books are great too.
I haven't read
Um,
them, but I'll take your word for it.
yeah. Um, so do friends, colleagues, and family read your books? Like, what's the difference when a family member reads it and maybe a colleague or, like do any of the doctors that you consult, do they read along with the books? Like, what's the overall, feedback and consensus?
I think people, my friends are really excited to read my book, and they always ask me if they can get early copies and try to, share inside, early versions. But I try to hold off on that because I want all readers, whether friends or anyone else, to read the final version of anything I write. But people are
Yeah,
very excited about it. The doctors and researchers who have reviewed my manuscripts for accuracy have given me great feedback, and um, have also shared uh, their gratitude, really, that in some ways I'm tackling topics that are not familiar to the general public and that they want more awareness of, like resuscitation, for
mm-hmm.
example, or stem cell research, which I've written about in fiction. So in a way, I hope
Right.
that I'm doing some kind of a public good there by getting more people familiar with the science and hopefully supportive of it.
Mm-hmm. It's fantastic. Now, Natalie has a pretty heavy question, and we talked earlier kind of about the societal impact and just, all the different impacts of living forever. But she says, would Earth be able to survive if everyone just lived forever?
I mean, first, let me preface that by saying I doubt that we'll ever get to a point where everyone on Earth is actually living forever. I don't think that's practical. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think Earth would be able to survive if that was the case. I think that would be
Mm-mm.
just unsustainable. But if we're talking about the next couple hundred years of medicine, if we get to the point where we can slow age related decline in people who have diseases or people who are on the verge of break their bodies breaking down, we can help give them some extra youthful years, maybe not forever, but say a good 20, 30 years left of life. I think that's a very noble goal and worth pursuing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so Shauna wants to know, at what point in your life did you decide you wanted to write? Did you just always know that? Was there just a switch that went on one day and you wanted to go for it, or what was the path kind of?
I always gravitated toward creative writing. I think part of it had to do with the fact that
Yeah.
I'm an only child, so I had no siblings to
Hmm.
play with. So I'd come home from school and just write a story to entertain myself, and that became
Yeah.
my kind of default way of amusement. So I got into it that way, and then I think I was around 12 years old when I decided, hey, this is something I really want to do in my life and make it a career one
Yeah.
day. So ever since then, I started to think of myself as a writer, even if I was just writing, silly little stories. But that
Right.
way of defining my identity helped take it seriously and pursue it in college and there on after.
Absolutely. That's inspiring. It's crazy that you're taking bioethics and you're doing your writing. You're so busy.
I have a lot. I have
It's
a
a
lot to
perfect
do.
balance, I'm sure.
A
Yeah,
lot to
right?
balance. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I remember, I think I asked you this question when we last spoke, but I think it's a great one. If you could just kind of stop, time and, just stay at any age, what would it be?
I think I
Is
would
there a
stay.
specific time?
I think I would stay the age I am right now. I'm
Hmm.
29, and I think it's a good age because I feel old enough to have experienced something of life and to know myself.
Exactly.
And I still feel like my body's young enough that I can exercise and do everything physical that I want to do actively, but I'm not yet
Yep.
declining. So I think this is a great age.
I agree. I am 29 as well. I know
Nice.
exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
All
staring
right,
down
so I
30
think yeah, you're like I want to stop it now.
right now. That's right.
Um, so I just wanted to thank you for coming to chat with us again. It's always a pleasure, and we want everyone to know that you can get No Time to Die on Kindle and iBooks for a reduced price only until January 20th. So check it out now. And it's just great to speak with you every time you come on Booktrib. And this is Kira Peikoff, author of No Time to Die. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is really fun.
Yeah,
All right,
thanks.
take care,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.